And what is going on, everyone? Welcome into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast this week here. So, if you guys have been following us this month here, we're doing honoring a Women in Fantasy Sports month here, bringing in women throughout the industry to talk about their journeys here, and of course, talk about fantasy football. That's kind of why we do our show here today. So, let me introduce my co-host / guest for this evening, Michelle Magdzuik from the Ball Blast Network. Hi, what's going on, Michelle?
Hi there. I'm always impressed when people don't butcher my last name. You said it close enough, and I appreciate it.
I had to go back and listen to your show again because I was like, I want to make sure I get their names right because I feel bad because I'm bad with names. So I was like, I want to hear it a couple times, and then I listened to a couple of your episodes recently, and I was like, I got it. I can do this now.
I love it. There's like 5 different ways you can say it. I'm like, you know what? That's good. But some people completely butcher it. I'm like, ooh.
Yes, let's go. So thank you for joining and being my co-host for this evening here. So let everyone know, obviously, kind of what you do in the industry.
Yeah, so my brand that I built with my wife is called Ball Blast. We have a podcast called Ball Blast Podcast, a fantasy football podcast. We also have a website. You can find us at ballblastfootball.com. We have an amazing group of writers just putting out great content every single day. So go follow our team over there. But yeah, I started in the industry about 3 years ago or so, and just been enjoying my time so far, growing. And I also work for the NFL Network. Sometimes I forget about that, but yeah, that's my full-time daytime job. Nothing to do with fantasy football, but I work in the football world over there for NFL Network.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So again, thank you for joining and being my co-host for this evening. So
yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So time to bring in our second guest of the evening here. She is with Yahoo Fantasy Sports, Liz Loza. Liz, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me in my very big hair tonight. My goodness, I just took a look at that. The humidity is clearly affecting it, but I am thrilled to be here, and I appreciate you guys on the East Coast putting up with my West Coast time dilemmas. So thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. I mean, like I said, we wanted to get you on here, and 10 p.m. is okay with me. I'm still up anyway, so talking fantasy at this time and just chatting with you ladies, can't go wrong with that. So that's how I feel.
Yeah, my bedtime's not till about midnight, but yeah. I am missing the Suns games for you, which I don't even care about the Suns, but I'm very into NBA playoffs all of a sudden. I don't know why.
They're super fun every year when the NBA and the NHL at the same time become relevant. I watch hockey all season long, but I particularly pay attention during the playoffs. I agree with you. There's something about like the stakes and the drama and the number of games, like every single night, there's something to watch. It fills the gap until we head into the fall. And
there's always some drama every single playoff game. Like something crazy happens. I can't get into hockey. I've tried 1 million times. I can't do it. I even live in Pittsburgh. You'd think I would love the Penguins. I can't get through a game.
Yeah, I'm only in the same. I can't do hockey, but basketball I can watch time and time again, and it's fun to see different teams. I think actually going to the finals this year for one, so that's great. But Liz, before we get started with our topics for the day, I just let everyone know. I kind of mentioned already, but let everyone know what you kind of do in the industry.
I mean, if you don't know me, I don't really know where you've been. If I'm being 100. So I work for Yahoo Fantasy, which is one of the most prolific platforms in the fantasy space. We do fantasy sports of all kinds. I focus primarily on fantasy football. I'm also an NFL analyst and contributor. I'm working the Olympics this year, and I've worked the Olympics every year that, every cycle. So I'll be working the Tokyo Olympics, very interesting schedule time-wise. Excited that it's happening. And I also sub in on a show called The Rush, which is a 5-day-a-week sports show. But yeah, anything Yahoo betting, fantasy, or NFL related, I'm usually a part of.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, like I said, ladies, thank you both for joining in tonight. So, like I said, guys listening out there, like I said, this whole month of June was to, kind of just talk about the women in the fantasy sports world and get their journeys and, things they've struggled with to help, up and coming young females to kind of want to get into this industry here. So, Michelle, I'll let you go first. Can you just talk about kind of your journey and kind of some obstacles that you've gone through that you can, kind of show as a, how to help others who are coming into the industry now?
Yeah, I think the key for, either gender trying to get into this industry is just to be consistent, build your brand, put yourself out there, be consistent, and don't be scared to make takes that you believe in, but always have a reason to back them up. I see a lot of people out there, they'll make a take, but they're not willing to debate it back and forth. Now, don't ever debate the trolls. I went through that for a long time. For the first year or so of Twitter, I debated back and forth with trolls and they drove me crazy. And you just look like an idiot when you're debating with them. But get out there, put your stuff, show your work, show that you're consistent, show that you always have a reason behind your takes. And I think that's the best way to make it in this industry, no matter if you're a female or male.
Absolutely. I could not disagree with you more on that. Liz, over to you. Again, your journey and kind of, some, if you have any advice for anyone.
My journey started similarly to Michelle's in that I just built my own site, my own blog, my own brand, and started creating my own content. And I think Michelle's 100 in that anyone, regardless of appearance or gender identification, you can create your own content. You just have to be consistent with it. You have to make a schedule out of it. It can't be like, well, some days I feel like posting this, and some days, you can do that if you want to keep it a hobby, which is totally fine as well, because Lord knows the space is becoming increasingly saturated. But if you are really focused on gaining traction and building a following, then you have to be consistent, and you have to say that your sleepers article comes out on this day, or your fab article comes out on the other day, and you have a video piece that comes out on this day, and you create a content schedule the way any big brand would, and engage. I don't particularly like to debate, not because I don't believe in my takes. I don't know if it's maybe I see more trolls at this point, but I feel like the point of debating is to show people who are watching and paying attention opposing viewpoints so they can make sound decisions versus being right. Like, I'm only presenting my side of a debate versus somebody else's, not so that I can win the debate, but so that as a piece of, I think of everything as a content creator. So if I'm debating just to debate because I like to be a loudmouth on Twitter, my life is too full for that at this point. I protect my energy, and I'm not going to leak it away just to fight and pretend and, stamp my foot. But I do think it's helpful when you're showing, and Michelle does this often, a set of statistics or a point of view, and then somebody has an alternative point of view. And that way, whoever is reading the thread can say oh, you know what? I love this point of Michelle's. I don't particularly like this point from Steve. So I'm glad I have it, though, because now I know where the movability in the argument exists. And so I think if you're debating for a purpose and not just to be the loudest, that's a great thing to do.
Yeah. And I always say the best piece of advice I can give someone that's looking for information on a player, find someone, that writes content about fantasy football. Find someone that loves that player and find someone that does not love that player. Read both sides and see which one you agree with more and who gave the better case. Even on our Ball Blast site, we have writers who write articles that I don't agree with at all. And I've written articles that say the opposite, but I'm still going to share those. And I want people to go read them because you want to read both sides of the story. God knows I've been wrong more times than not, so I'm wrong all the time, right? We all are.
It's about the process.
Yeah, it's about the process. But no, you got to read both sides because everyone's wrong. It's fantasy football. You never know what's going to happen.
Well, just trying our best out here. That's all you can really do. But no, ladies, that were both great takes here. You guys have really made a name for yourselves in the industry well far and beyond. So I'm really happy to be able to sit down today and just talk fantasy with you both. So we're going to start with our first side topic for the evening here. And, I'm going to start with Liz on this one. Just one player that, you're looking forward to draft in redrafts this year.
Okay, well, I'm just going to open by saying I don't really love the, like, this is the guy I target, because I think the minute you lock in on somebody, you might mess up roster construction and you get too fixated. So that just being said, I am very excited to see also, and I'm sure Michelle could speak to this once you become an analyst, like, you fall less in love with the moves you make every week and more in love with the takes that your flag guys. So I don't know if I'll end up having Terry McLaurin, who I'm very excited about, on all of my rosters, because I don't know if he will fall to me. And also I play in expert leagues and a lot of people are high on him. So, but I think McLaurin has a really massive opportunity, even though last year didn't pan out. I am completely infatuated with the YOLO arm of Ryan Fitzpatrick in combination with all that makes Terry completely scary. There are some people who are worried about volume and the addition of Curtis Samuel, but I think that Terry McLaurin's skill set, his strength, his speed, his technique is so alpha that I'm not worried about him not being the number one in that offense. And also, here's a fun stat. McLaurin averaged nearly 88 air yards per contest, and that was throughout the entire season. If you pair that down to when he worked exclusively with Alex Smith, who obviously has an antithetical skill set to Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? He and you move out the week 11 game where McLaurin had the ankle sprain, he averaged over 72 air yards per game. That was wide receiver 22 overall during that time span. If he can do that with a game manager, albeit a very fierce one, in Alex Smith, imagine what he can do with a little bit of DGAF. I am super excited. I think he's going to easily be a top 10 producer in fantasy.
So he's going around like round 4 or so right now, round 3, whatever. Would you consider him as a guy you would go after, say, as your actual wide receiver one on your team?
I might be okay with that. I mean, depending on, the roster construction and the format, but I would be comfortable with Terry McLaurin as my wide receiver one. There's also so much. I mean, like, even if you look at Cincinnati, like Boyd and Higgins and Chase are all kind of in that same glut of wide receiver 3 players, and they're all going to catch over 80 balls, and they're all going to flirt with 1,000 yards. I think Chase probably has 1,100 in them. Higgins has the advantage in touchdowns as the red zone threat, and we know that in PPR, Boyd is probably going to hit like 900-ish, but he'll go over 80 catches. Like, I am okay waiting on receiver, because even that one example of one team has such a glut of opportunities later. But if I want a guy, like my stud guy, my flag guy, I'm okay with McLaurin as my wide receiver one.
Love that, because I'm a big Terry McLaurin fan, so I love that there, Liz. Love that. Michelle, over to you. What person are you excited about this coming 2020 drafts?
Yeah, my guy's actually being drafted kind of right around Terry McLaurin, who I also love. But if I had to choose between Terry McLaurin or Deontay Johnson, I would go Deontay Johnson. Now, it's specifically in PPR leagues. That's what makes him so exciting, right? He dealt with a lot of injuries last year. Either people forget that or they're holding a grudge against him, but he would start a lot of games and then he would exit those games super quickly. So you started him and you got like 1 or 2 points before he left the game in the first quarter. That really, really hurts you to start the season. But then in the 11 games that he fully played, he averaged 12 targets per game and 19 fantasy points per game in those 11 games. That is more than DeAndre Hopkins. That's more than Calvin Ridley average per game. And they were both top 5 fantasy wide receivers. He had 144 targets last year. And like I'm saying, he missed a massive chunk of games, like nearly 4 entire games. And that was still made him the 6th most targeted wide receiver in the league. And I don't see those targets decreasing this year. Like, yeah, they get a new offensive coordinator. Thank goodness, because their one last year was completely garbage. So hopefully it'll open up the offense, but I still think he's going to see around 150 targets. He's their best separator on the team. He's one of the best separators in the NFL, according to Yahoo's Matt Harmon, great Matt Harmon, but he loves him some Deontay Johnson as well. Like, he's a super talented wide receiver that people do not give him credit for. I know he had the dropsies, but I'm not too worried about it. And he also had a concussion, which can cause spatial issues, right? Like, so he had the injuries, the concussion. I'm not worried about the drops. He has good hands. He's a separator. And he's going as a wide receiver 22 right now in drafts, according to Fantasy Pros. that is just a steal. Like, I think that would be his floor if he's healthy. And I do also believe, like Terry McLaurin, he could be a top 10 wide receiver next year in PPR leagues.
Both those wide receivers I'm very happy about right now in terms of redraft. But does the addition of Najee Harris doesn't scare you off from them producing that level still?
Hopefully it will help them. I mean, they had no run game last year. It wasn't even necessarily all due to James Conner. They all had their issues, but they ran on 85% of the time they were under center. So they were just the most predictive offense in the NFL by far. I think the change in offensive coordinator will instantly help, just open up everything. And the threat of Najee Harris actually running the ball should open up the passing game as well.
Absolutely love that there. Liz, back over to you here now. A player that you're less than excited about or possibly avoiding in these coming up drafts.
I know there's a lot of Will Fuller hype around, and I get it. I understand we're giving Tua all the things, but the thing that Tua got that I'm more excited about is Jalen Waddle. And I think when you look at Waddle and Fuller's skill set, they're not the same player. I'm not comping Waddle to Fuller before everyone gets real riled up, but there is obviously some overlap in their skill sets. And I'm going to give Waddle the upside of the unknown, because that unknown is not unknown to his quarterback. And if we look at the struggles that Tua had to deliver into tight windows, right? Like, that's why he had trouble connecting with a contested catch specialist like Devontae Parker. And we think about Will Fuller's inability to stay on the field. He's been active for 29 games over his last 3 seasons. I just feel like Waddle is starting from not a typical rookie place. And I'm not saying that I'm drafting Waddle in a lot of places. In best ball, certainly, I think he's going to win somebody a ton of money, a bunch of people a bunch of money in DFS. But when I look at him in relation to Will Fuller, I feel like his presence on the field decreases what Fuller could do, because he is this explosive deep threat, and he's going to use speed and elusiveness to consistently put space between himself and defenders. And so that makes me less excited about Will Fuller.
I love it there. I love you threw Jalen Waddle in there. Obviously a big Dolphins fan behind me here. And Waddle will be someone I'll be talking about later on in today's show. So, Michelle, over to you here. What one player that you're less excited about?
Yeah, and I completely agree with you there, Liz. Like, Will Fuller is not someone I would ever target drafting. Like, I can't imagine him on any of my teams. But I guess maybe best ball. I almost called it ball blast. I do that often. Sometimes best ball, if you were to drop, maybe, but I still would be avoiding him. One guy I'm avoiding, and everyone loves him, so I'm sure they're going to get mad at me, is Cam Akers. And it's not that I don't think he's going to get the volume, or not that I don't think he's good, but he's currently going as the running back 11 already in June. That's his ADP, according to Fantasy Pros. That's before Antonio Gibson, before Najee Harris, before DeAndre Swift, before DeAndre Hopkins, A.J. Brown, like all guys I would take pretty easily over Akers. The Swift Akers one is the one that gets close for me there. But like, I cannot imagine drafting him at that price. Like, last year, he struggled efficiency-wise. Like, even when he was getting a ton of touches, he wasn't scoring a ton of fantasy points. He scored 0.65 fantasy points per touch last season. That was only more than Frank Gore. That's it. Frank Gore. That's the only one he could beat in fantasy points per touch, among running backs with 150 touches, of course. But like, towards the end of the year, he was getting a massive amount of touches. 22 touches in one game, he scored 16 PPR points. Cool. 31 touches in a game, he scored 21 PPR points. That's a fantastic fantasy week, don't get me wrong. But on 31 touches, come on, do a little bit more than that. 25 touches in another game, 10 PPR points. How? I don't even know how that's possible. I don't know how you can be that bad. And we have yet to see Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson on the field together when they're both fully healthy. Now, Akers is clearly the lead back. Don't get me wrong. Like, Henderson will come in sporadically, and Cam Akers will get his 250 carries or close to that. But we don't know if he's going to continue getting 25 to 30 touches, is what we were seeing last year, and that's what people are depending on. They brought in Matthew Stafford for a reason. I think they're going to air it out more often. He wasn't getting targets last year. He feels so much like last year's Josh Jacobs, which ended up being 5. Josh Jacobs was a top 10 running back, but it never felt good, right? Like he didn't get the targets. It was just, it didn't feel good putting him into your lineup. It all was volume based, and he scored 12 touchdowns. That's pretty much the only reason why he was so great fantasy. And Akers really struggled around the goal line. Darrell Henderson was better on the goal line. Who knows what happens there? I can't imagine drafting him near his cost right now.
Okay. Liz, do you have a similar hate for that?
I understand all of Michelle's reasoning, and it does bother me that Akers is going as high as he is. I will admit that I have Akers and Antonio Gibson back-to-back in my rankings, Akers 12, Gibson 13. I think what we're counting on with Akers is that home run ability that we saw him move into. Also, Sean McVay is like, when he's your guy, he's your guy. And when he's not your guy no more, as we saw with Jared Goff, he will bust throw you into nothingville. So I feel like right now, Cam Akers is very much McVay's guy. And the presence of Matt Stafford on the field, along with all of the passing elements that they're folding in, that McVay is folding in, is going to stretch the field, which should allow Akers to just consistently, I mean, his breakaway run rate should be top 10 easily at the end of the season if he stays healthy. And yet, I still don't really want him to be my RB1. So maybe I'm hedging. I think if push comes to shove, I would probably do it, but I might, I'd take, for example, Austin Eckler over either Gibson or Cam Akers.
Let me ask you, Liz, are you taking Najee Harris as a rookie or Cam Akers?
Would I take who?
Najee Harris or Cam Akers?
I'd probably take Cam Akers.
That one hurts my heart, but I'm so with you.
But they're very close, because I will say my rankings go, I just looked at them. Cam Akers 12, Antonio Gibson 13, Najee Harris 14. So you're right in the exact sphere of players. I mean, that's going to be like roster construction, who's falling to me, and am I wanting to just like high? I think the reason Akers is going so high is because we know the ceiling is so high. And so you're going to count on those like giant runs all the time. And so those can be difference makers, but you're also going to pay for upside like that, especially coming off of what he just presented at the end of the season.
Yeah.
I like that.
And there's a premium. Michelle's totally right. You're paying a premium for that upside, for that ceiling.
Yeah, I'll have him. I mean, I'm not going to have him super low. I'll have him projected. Like right now, he's at like running back 13, but I still have a couple more teams to do. And I know that like those running backs are going to jump him. So I'll have him around running back 15. That's not low. It's just like I don't know. And I don't see the ceiling that you see. I think he will be a running back 15 purely based on volume. I just don't think he can be a top 5 running back.
Now, I just don't think he has it in his skill set?
I don't think you'll see the targets
through the passing, through the air. I
don't think he'll see enough targets to be a top 5 running back, and I don't think he'll score enough touchdowns. I do still think Henderson will steal a decent amount of work, even though Akers will clearly snap him and out carry him. I still think Henderson could steal that goal line work. Like Malcolm Brown would come in all the time and steal goal line work. Henderson came in last year and stole goal line work. I still think that will be how it is. And goal line production changes year to year. Like that's not something you can count on. Akers struggled last year. He could be great this year. Like Nick Chubb was one of the worst in 2019 and was one of the best in 2020. But Henderson did outproduce him last year. Like what if that keeps up? We don't know. We don't know yet. It's too many questions for his price.
Yeah, that late round one it's too rich for my blood as well. I mean, I'd rather take the shot on Harris and on the unknown. We don't know about him yet because he has, I'd say, similar season to Cam Akers, and there's no one in the backfield that's competing with Harris right now. I mean, Benny Snell, McFarland, they're just guys. They're not guys who can take over a game on a season long basis. I think Harris has that full skill set that makes him the guy who's going to see the heavy workload compared to Akers, which you'll see a bigger workload, but Henderson will be involved in. So,
also, just a fun fact about Najee Harris, who I admit I am super high on as well. The last time the Steelers drafted a running back in the first round, it was Rashard Mendenhall. So that says something about their investment in the position and the talent.
Yeah. Well, him just bringing up the name Benny Snell made me so angry. I don't know why the name Benny Snell makes me so angry, but as a Steelers fan, there's not a word you can say that would make me more upset. He's just the worst. Oh, yeah.
Just the worst.
Just the worst.
Just the worst. I love it. I love it. All right. So that was our side topic. Just asking our two guests to kind of tell us, their favorite player and their not favorite player, but player they like and not like as much. So over to our main topic of the night, guys. We're talking about late round gems. Obviously, this is a part of drafts where you could get a diamond in the rough, and it could really help you win a championship. It won't hurt you per se, and it could a little bit, but it really can't hurt you in those later rounds. You really, you're shooting for, gold at that point, and that's why we all got 3 players here that kind of help us, take that next step here. So, Michelle, we'll let you go first on this one here. Who's your first late round gem you're targeting?
I didn't know how crazy we're getting here. And I almost want to take one first because I have a feeling other people are going to, but I won't. I'll stick with my order. Wide receiver Mike Williams from the Chargers. I've never fallen for him before. So I feel like it's my turn to get hurt by him. I know everyone else in the fantasy world has already been hurt by him, but this is my first time buying in to the talent. He was a 1,000-yard receiver in 2019. He had 10 receiving touchdowns in 2018. And then in 2020, he dealt with just a lot of injuries. He was injured before the even season started. We didn't think he was going to play, and then he played. I think this is his first year with Justin Herbert, where he fully gets to have that practice all offseason long because, they were trying to go with Tyrod Taylor last year for some reason instead of Herbert. So I think this whole offseason will help him. I like the talent there. There's enough targets to go around with Hunter Henry gone as well. It can't be all Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler. They need a second guy. And I do think Mike Williams can be that red zone threat. He can score those double-digit touchdowns. I don't expect 1,200 yards or anything like that, but I do think he can hit that 1,000 receiving yards, 10 touchdown mark. And at his ADP, that's a pretty nice flex player to plug in when you need him.
Yeah, no, I couldn't disagree more with you. I mean, he has that ceiling. He just never hit it yet. And, you can make excuses that Phillip Rivers at the end of his career was his quarterback. You can make excuses for the injuries, but I think could be the year. Justin Herbert is a quarterback that we obviously seen who can play at the next level here. And if he can just continue what he was doing at the end of last year, Mike Williams could have that, 900, 8 touchdown kind of season that makes him that wide receiver 3 kind of season going forward.
But when he gets hurt eventually, then y'all should pay attention to Josh Palmer. When he breaks your heart, which he's going to do. I mean, this is the guy that is still texting you at 2 a.m. being like, you up? And you're like, no, fool. I thought I blocked you. Stop using this burner. Then you pay attention to Josh Palmer. But I get you, Michelle. We all need to do it. And statistically, if you look at the numbers, you're right, which is why everyone keeps because it should work. You're 100% right.
Yeah, because even last season, I know he was injured, but in the games he saw more 5 or more targets, he averaged 80 receiving yards per game, and he also scored 5 receiving touchdowns in those 8 games that he saw 5 or more targets. It's all there. He just has to stay healthy, and hopefully he does it for me this year. But yeah, Liz, you're probably right. He's going to hurt me. I do really like Josh Palmer. I'm excited for him.
Can you imagine also Josh Palmer, the change in quarterback for him? Talk about an upgrade, what he had to deal with in Tennessee, and then now he gets Justin Herbert. He is a nice, it's just a rookie name for people in Dynasty, or just if you're tracking names. I like to track certain names and kind of pin them throughout the summer process to see who is getting buzz out of camp and who, is climbing up the depth chart. And Palmer is someone that I'm keeping an eye on. You probably won't draft him though.
Justin Herbert made Jalen Guyton a thing for a couple weeks.
Correct.
When Mike Williams and Keenan Allen were out, he actually made Jalen Guyton a thing, and the other wide receiver, I can't think of his name right now, but whoever is out there, Justin Herbert is going to make a thing in fantasy. So that's why if Mike Williams could just stay healthy.
And Palmer's a 3rd round pick, which is not he's not some final day selection.
For sure.
So he could see the field as early as week 1. I mean, it just takes 1 or 2 plays to make him relevant. So I mean, now both those guys are good. But Liz, over to your first late round gem here.
So I, again, didn't know how deep we were going. I decided to go super deep because, like I said, I feel like this time of year, if we're summertime. These are names that I am just putting out there and asking people to track and maybe take note of, because you're likely not going to draft them unless you're in some like super deep league. But if and when the fab moment comes and injuries start to mount, especially in a season now that will have 17 games, I think you're going to want to pay attention to running backs in particular. And Ramondre Stevenson on the Patriots is somebody that I am definitely paying attention to over the summer. He's 5'11", 213 pounds, pretty imposing presence at that size. You can also guess that he is a power back, right? His running style is not particularly creative, but he does have a really, if you watch his tape, like I find like a really gorgeous intensity to the way he plays. He is strong. He is focused. He was selected in the 4th round by New England, and he's already been flashing in off-season workouts. He was comped to LeGarrette Blount, in fact, by the running backs coach, Ivan Fears. And when we look at the backfield in New England, what do we have? We've got Damian Harris, who I liked a lot, but let's be honest, he is a jack of all trades and a master of none. And Sony Michel, who did not get his 5th-year option picked up, who has been inefficient, who has been hurt. And Harris himself has also had some durability issues. He's only played 11 games over 2 years, and he's only recorded 21 red zone touches. That's RB 48 and 2 touchdowns over 10 games last year. There is some concern, obviously, about the quarterback situation, if Cam Newton is going to continue to vulture the goal line, but I think those days are starting to wane a little bit. And so I think that Stevenson, if he's getting comped to Blount, could play a role as the season progresses in this offense. And he could be that, that goal line vulture, which is still important because those are still 6 points in touchdown. I'm not saying you necessarily chase those guys, but I do think that he has the potential, especially in that system, to grow into a larger role beyond just, a 2-down role or a goal line role.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I mean, there's definitely many injuries at the RB position, and I honestly think at some point Mac Jones gets in there, and that will help open up touchdowns because Mac Jones isn't running in 3-yard goal line touchdowns like Cam Newton would. So I mean, you're going to have the running back used more. You're going to keep your rookie quarterback kind of away from throwing the ball as much as possible, and Stevenson could easily find himself a big workload in year one. So I love that Liz there a lot. Over to mine here now. The first guy I went with, and I kind of mixed mine up between really late and kind of like in the middle there, and I went with Darnell Mooney. His value could end up going into less up until like round 8 or whatever before the start of the season with his hype he's getting this offseason. But right now his ADP, if I can find it real quick, it's at 169 still right now.
I'm surprised it's not in the 2nd round with all the hype he's getting. People love Darnell Mooney. I'm
a big Mooney fan as well, but I said when it comes to Mooney, he's going still late. And again, people just aren't buying into, I guess, the idea of the Bears and being an elite offense, which I'm not. I'm not at all. I'm not saying that, but he has the opportunity, and that's the biggest thing. I mean, last year he was kind of consistent. He didn't really do anything too crazy that really made you say, oh, like Mooney is someone that I really want to see. He really flashed to that level on film, but he has that level in him, and I think that you'll see this year with an upgrade at the quarterback position. You don't have Mitch or Nick Foles now. You have Andy Dalton, who at times last year can still be a decent quarterback if he is to start. I mean, he made guys with downfield presence like Michael Gallup last year somewhat relevant at the end of last season. And then if not, Justin Fields. He was one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL in college level last year to finish with touchdown passes of 20-plus yards. He had the 3rd most air yards in college last year. And Mooney, last year himself, he had 30% of the team's 20-plus yards down the field, and that's over guys like Allen Robinson. Again, there's Jimmy Graham who was there who isn't going to see those 79 targets he had last year. Anthony Miller had 71, who they're basically getting ready to kick him out of the door. Mooney, he saw 85 last year, but I think you're going to see a better 85, and I think he could get close to 100 targets this season with an upgrade at quarterback and a more efficiency in his game that could see some kind of breakouts kind of level in his game. So if he's sitting there still in that double-digit round, he could end up someone who can end up seeing that wide receiver 3 value or possibly low in wide receiver 2 if he gets to the right level.
It all comes down to, is it Andy Dalton or Justin Fields? Because if it's Andy Dalton, I don't feel good about him feeding Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney. Justin Fields would make me a little bit more interested.
Yeah, no, definitely. Fields.
I think it's going to be Andy Dalton, guys. I mean, and the reason I say this is not just like Bears fandom and the Nagy coach speak, but after Nagy was quoted last week as saying that, quote, Justin Fields cannot, in all caps, win the starting job, I looked at the Vegas lines, and the Bears' odds to win the division went down. The Packers were the front runners, and then the Bears and the Vikings had the exact same odds. Detroit was at like plus 1,200 or something.
Everyone go bet that. No.
Really bad. But the odds went down for the Bears were now in third place. So I feel like Vegas always knows. I always check those after I see like a big quote from a coach. I want to see how the lines are affected, because if the lines aren't affected, it doesn't really bother me. But Vegas always tends to know. So that makes me think that Dalton is at least, I mean, week one is they open the season at SoFi against the Rams. You're not putting Justin Fields for his first game ready for him to be mauled by Aaron Donald. That's not happening. And week two is Cincinnati. You're going to give Andy Dalton that moment, right? So there you go.
Yeah. That's true.
If I have to watch Andy Dalton, like, why? Like, you still have.
Girl, you gotta watch Andy Dalton. I'm a Bears fan. I gotta watch Andy Dalton.
He wasn't horrible with the Cowboys last year. He made Cooper and Gallup near the end of that season. They were both playing very well. Lamb kind of took a step back, but both Gallup and Cooper were performing to a wide receiver 3 level or better at this season. I know it's a different offense, different team, but Andy Dalton still has something in his tank there, I think.
It's also worth mentioning that Andy Dalton got COVID and a concussion. So that's a lot.
It's also worth mentioning that he played in his prime with an elite defense that brought him to the playoffs over and over and over again, and he could not win a playoff game. And he was not any more than just average. Like, so even if your Bears have elite defense again, it's like you already saw his ceiling with an elite defense in his prime. And now I think he's already gotten out of that. So so my issue is I love Justin Fields. I haven't put him as my quarterback 1 out of the rookies because, everyone is saying Trevor Lawrence is a better quarterback. So how can I go against that? But I still think Justin Fields will have a better career.
Well, Vegas odds has Justin Fields as number 2 behind Trevor Lawrence to win Rookie of the Year. So there is still a shot there. Yeah.
Okay.
The number shifted, but he was still behind Trevor Lawrence, and then just behind Justin Fields, Trey Lance, and Zach Wilson had the exact same odds. So they were in third place, but tied for third.
What we need to happen is that Dalton just needs to throw 5 interceptions against the Rams, and then hopefully the change will happen immediately.
Yeah, it's going to be the week 1 starter, and then, all right, Fields, you're in now. That was just a joke, guys. We're not playing Andy Dalton all season. So, all right. So over to our next ones here. Liz, we'll let you go first on this one. Who's your good one?
Oh, gosh. Well, I did have, let's see, who should I do? You know what? Do you guys want to talk about Gabriel Davis or one of those Detroit Lions? Should we stay NFC North? I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is someone I'm interested in if we're going to stay deep. Again, this is someone you're not really drafting, but you should probably know his name. He was a 4th-round selection. His brother, Equanimous, plays in the same division for the Packers. Everybody knows that. He was also the only in the 2021 NFL draft, the only receiver added by the Lions, which is important to note because Kenny Golladay left the squad. Marvin Jones left the squad. Danny Amendola left the squad. And they're going to replace him with a slot receiver. That's all they're giving Jared Goff. But we also know that Jared Goff does quite well with slot receivers if we look at his production with Cooper Kupp from all of the years previous to existing in Los Angeles. So a little bit about Brown, USC grad, good route runner, natural hands, very good body control, probably going to play, like I said, as a slot option. And I think he might be one of these PPR plays for no other reason than volume, if he can put it together on the field. But I feel he's just going to get this is a volume is king answer. And I think especially in PPR, he's gonna draw a lot of looks. And I want to see what the rapport between he and Goff is over the summer.
No, that's a great one, honestly, because I think by the time August gets here and the new depth charts come out for the teams, I think St. Brown could end up being one of the starters early on in this year. I don't really think that both Perriman and Williams will start week 1 season. I think St. Brown could end up being that guy who's kind of takes that next level as the camp comes on. So he could end up being slowly drafted by the time the end of August gets here.
Yeah, and I think just really quickly to add to that, when we're looking at all of these names, if they're not familiar to people, and frankly, they shouldn't be, it's my job, so that's why they are to me, but I like to look at these in which of these things is not like the other, right? So like Brown has a different skill set than the guys who are on the squad already. Terry McLaurin to me has a different skill set than the quote competition in targets. So like I always want to target the guys. That's why I didn't like Fuller, right? Because he and Waddle can kind of eat out of the same I don't know, trough. That's not a great analogy, but it's late. So I want to like try to target the player in the receiving core that is like different from the rest of them and won't compete as much overall.
Definitely love that there for sure. Michelle, did you feel the same way about St. Brown?
Absolutely not. And I'm smiling because my sleeper pick right now is Brashad Perriman. Like that's who I was about to talk about next. So you guys are just going off on like how St. Brown's better than Perriman, which is fine, even though, coming out of college, they weren't even close to prospects. My biggest issue with St. Brown is I found him very underwhelming when watching his tape. Like I didn't see anything special. The only reason that I would think people are excited is for the possibility of volume, which could definitely happen. But that's also why I want Perriman, right? He's going as a wide receiver 85 right now in ADP. You can just grab him in the last round. Like that's all you have to do. And there's very few wide receivers that you can draft in the last round that have an actual real opportunity of being the wide receiver 1 for his team. And no matter how bad the offense is, right, he still has the opportunity to lead his team in targets and yards and touchdowns. So I'm willing to take that bet. Like Perriman over the last couple of years hasn't been that bad. Yes, he's been bad with Sam Darnold, but literally every person is bad with Sam Darnold as the quarterback. But in games, he's actually been on the field, like 75+% of snaps. And he's played without Sam Darnold. He's played with either Jameis Winston or Joe Flacco. That's been 7 games. And in those 7 games, which I think is a decent enough sample size, he's averaged 91 receiving yards per game and 1 full touchdown per game. Like he can get it done when he's actually on the field and not with the worst quarterback in the NFL. Yes, I'll say it again. Sam Darnold is the worst quarterback in the NFL, besides maybe Drew Lock. I'll say that.
Oh my God, both my boyfriends, Christ.
So, right, like people will bring up Jared Goff's not a great deep passer. Well, he wasn't a bad deep passer at all when he had Brandon Cooks. He just hasn't had a deep wide receiver, especially last year. When he had Brandon Cooks healthy, they actually connected just fine. And I think you can see that same thing with Perriman. Now, Perriman's not going to be a guy that you're going to want to plug in every single week. Like that's not going to feel good. He's going to blow your lineups quite often, but he's perfect for best ball. And I do think he's perfect in that late round pick. Take him in the last round, see if he's getting those targets. If he's not, you can drop him. If you take a rookie wide receiver that's like a St. Brown, you're going to be like, oh, I have to hold on. Like maybe he'll break out. And then you're holding on and it's kind of wasting up a spot. So that's why I kind of want to go Perriman there, see what happens. I like the opportunity.
Michelle, I agree 100%, by the way, with everything Michelle said. I opened by saying you're not drafting this guy. But I did not know. I just looked at my rankings and I have Perriman around wide receiver 60. So, like, I didn't know his ADP. Thank you for telling me. I think that's a great last round pick because of the upside, especially in best ball. I 100% echo all of those things. And I definitely have – I don't even think I have St. Brown ranked, to be honest with you. So, Michelle is totally right. Also, just keep an ear out for St. Brown. But if you're drafting, 100 Michelle.
Yeah, and who knows in this offense? It could be nobody, right? You might want nobody.
TJ Hawkinson is going to see all of the targets. Like that. Yeah. That's it, right?
Yeah, we'll see how that offense goes. It could be a disaster.
I hope not. So, especially for fantasy, but I like to take there at the end about taking a veteran at the end of the draft instead of the rookie because you get so thinking, especially people who might do dynasty and redraft, they think, oh, the rookies, and then you get there and they're not performing the first few weeks, and then you just drop them anyway. Or you hold on to them, actually. I'm sorry. You hold on to them longer, and they end up just not performing a lot of the times there. Wow.
And so many times do people drop him, right? Like Nick Chubb was dropped his rookie season. Someone drafted him, and then he dropped last year. I'm sure so many people drafted Cam Akers and then dropped him. Like, it's so much better to let other people draft those late round guys, like those late round rookies that you don't expect to do much in the beginning, and then grab them off waivers when someone drops them.
Would you say that the exceptions to those, though, are Jamar Chase and
Devonta Smith,
and maybe Jalen Waddle because of the rapport pre-existing with the quarterback?
I would say Elijah Moore.
I like Elijah Moore.
I probably wouldn't draft Jalen Waddle. I'm not high on him this season like you are. I'm really high on his talent. I think he's super talented. I just don't know what his target share will look like this year.
No, I agree. I mean, the reason I like him is why I don't like Fuller, right? It's not that I'm saying go target Waddle. But I think that you're drafting. The only thing that excites me about Waddle is because he does have pre-existing like chemistry with the quarterback. And clearly that was part of the drafting process. I do think, side note, it's fascinating to me over this draft process as we are forcing these young quarterbacks on the field faster, right? There's no more like learning behind a vet. We'll see what happens in San Francisco. But like, this seems to be quite a myth, right? It's not in 2021 a realistic possibility. So in order to speed up this maturation process, it feels like this season in particular, and maybe like the COVID plateau had something to do with it, like front offices are like, well, who is that guy's number one guy in college? He was real good too. Let's just put him together and like, there's no more need to speed date. Let's just like go back to the old one, you know? I think that's fascinating.
I know there was 3 of them, and I don't think there's ever been, I did some stat like that during the draft and now I forget it. So I'm not even going to bring it up, but I don't think there was 2 first rounders in back-to-back drafts that have been drafted from the same college. And then we had 2 of them in the first round this year from last year's first round. I just said that terribly.
Etienne is the other one you're talking about. Travis Etienne.
Oh yeah, so it was
reuniting with Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, and then Devonta Smith with Jalen Hurts, if you want to include that.
Right.
Yeah.
I do think Devonta Smith would be my number 1 rookie to draft at his price and his opportunity. Immediately, I think he goes into I'm way higher on Jalen Hurts than most people are as well, though. So that's probably why I feel that way.
If you look at the talent surrounding both these guys here, I mean, you have Higgins and Boyd on one side, and who do you have? Jalen Reagor, Travis Fulgham. I mean, there's a difference between the 2 supporting cast there, that's for sure. So
it's like, do you want a giant piece of like a not delicious pie, or do you want a slice of the best pie ever? Right? Like, that's kind of what you're deciding between those. Like, I don't know, Jamar Chase's pie is going to be delicious, but like,
I think it also depends on what kind of league you're playing in. If you're playing in PPR, I'm going Devonta Smith because I think he's going to get way more targets. Like, Jamar Chase wasn't even a target guy at LSU. He was that deep receiver touchdown guy, even though Devonta Smith was a touchdown guy too. But, you know, like, so standard, I probably would go Chase. PPR, I'm going Devonta Smith. Now, don't get me wrong. When I was ranking the guys coming out of school, Jamar Chase was first, Devonta Smith was second. I just think in year 1, Devonta Smith has an easier route to 130 targets year 1.
Exactly. So I'm gonna switch into mine here and stick with the third guy who was drafted after those 2, or no, the guy in between them who was drafted between them and Jalen Waddle. He's gonna be one of my late round gems. I love it. I love Jalen Waddle, and I'm not saying as a Dolphins fan, whatever. You know, I'm not being biased at all about this here, but when you look at the Dolphins offense this coming season here, you have Devontae Parker, you have Will Fuller, you have Jalen Waddle at that point. Will Fuller is going to miss a game week 1 already, so he's going to have that. He's only going to miss that early on connection with Tua. And you have Devontae Parker, who I just don't think he fits what Tua can do the best. I think, Liz, I think you mentioned that earlier, and I just don't see it hitting right with Devontae Parker. And then you have Jalen Waddle here, who unfortunately has the most experience with Tua out of all the wide receivers, and he's never played a college down with it. I mean, an NFL down with him yet in his career. And the way that Waddle works is because he's just not like Will Fuller. He's not a guy who just goes down the field and deep consistently. He can do that very well, but he's a guy that can move around this offense very well and to do different things. And I think you're going to see a lot of that this coming year because they drafted him so high. You know, they drafted over guys like, you know, they drafted him over Smith, who I thought they were going to take Smith. They drafted Waddle. They liked Waddle a lot. That was their guy after Pitts and Jamar Chase. And the way they're going to move him, and I think they're going to be able to do a lot of end arounds. He's going to be on punt returns a lot, so he's going to have that opportunity there in the fantasy game to get a couple punt returns kicked back. And they're just going to find ways to get him open and let him do what he does best and beat people with speed and a lot of speed, and he has a lot of that. So I think he's going what was it right now? He is going ADP, where are we at here? 125, which puts him around 11 or so at this point, around 10. I think that's around 10, 11, 13, whatever. That is right. I can't think of doing math at this time of night, but that I think is a perfect spot to go and grab your wide receiver for, because I think he has a lot of boom or bust potential in his game here, and I think he can help you win a lot of weeks because someone has to catch the ball in Miami. They're not going to just run the ball. This isn't really a run first team per se. They're going to have to throw, and Tua is going to have to throw the ball enough. And Devontae Parker, like I said, doesn't fit. Will Fuller hasn't really had the experience with him, and he can't even stay on the field. And Mike Gesicki is so in terms of the connection he has with Tua. I think Waddle can be that guy early on and take that and run with it. And I think as your wide receiver 3 or 4 more than likely to be safer, he has that upside that you really want to go out and grab.
I'm happy Liz agrees with you.
I think it's exciting. I mean, I don't know. It's June. ADP is such a myth right now. We'll see what happens in August and the movement of the ADP, and there will inevitably be enough puff pieces. I'm so jaded by now. Enough puff pieces come July that start to move players around. So I think it's exciting to watch a new player come into the league. And sometimes I admittedly a little bit like Sean Payton and distracted by shiny new toys, which is why I want to talk about my third guy. Can I do it real quick? Because I wanted to talk about a running back, a wide receiver, and a tight end. And I almost wanted to discuss Cole Kmet, but then when you went Bears with Darnell Mooney, I wanted to talk Adam Troutman.
No, I knew I should have done him before. I hate you. That was my guy.
Well, do you want me to do Kmet?
You could do Adam Troutman.
Okay. I am obsessed with him. I cannot figure out why his ADP, he's the tight end 20 right now. This is bananas. I mean, first of all, when the New Orleans Saints give up 4 picks to scoop a prospect at a scheme-friendly position, you take note, even if you know that note won't be good for a year. So, everybody who missed on Troutman last year, it's fine. You got it. 2020 didn't count in many, many ways. But this guy, he's 6'5", 255 pounds. Yes, he came from a small school. Yes, he's a converted quarterback. It doesn't matter because his skill set was incredible. And you watch him adjust to the ball midair. It's incredible. You watch him yak it up after the catch, and it's awesome. You watch him win in the red zone, and it's awesome. But yes, that's college. Fine. He also gives an A+ effort as a blocker, and he managed to improve as a blocker his rookie season, which we don't ever hear about from the tight end position, and graded out as PFF's number one run blocking tight end in 2020, receiving a grade of 84.1. He converted 15 of 16 looks last year. Not a giant sample size, but a hint about his efficiency, at least. You know that Jared Cook is in Los Angeles now on the Chargers. Josh Hill is off the squad. So that frees up 70 targets. You factor in Emmanuel Sanders' departure, and Troutman could easily be third in team looks on the Saints. And his ADP is currently tight at 20. That's a whole lot of upside.
Yeah. When you look at tight ends that break out, they're always on offenses that do not have a wide receiver 2, or at least a reliable wide receiver 2.
Michelle.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
Troutman is in the perfect situation, and he was an elite receiving tight end at Dayton in his last year. 912 receiving yards, 14 receiving touchdowns in his last year at Dayton. That's absurd for a tight end. He is a great receiving tight end. He's in a perfect offense with Sean Payton. This is the guy you want to take late, and I expect his ADP to jump up. There's no way we can all talk about this. I don't understand how it's not already jumping up, but I would still, if you're looking, if he even gets up to the 9th, 10th round, I would much rather go with that than take one of those middle round guys that always tend to fail, right? Like, yeah, give me Kelsey, give me Kittle, give me Waller in the beginning rounds if I want to go that way. But then once you get to those middle round guys, it seems like they always fail. I'll wait to the 9th, 10th, 11th round to take Troutman. I love him.
Where are you taking Pitts in relation?
Oh my goodness. I don't know, because I do think of him as a unicorn, and I do think he's going to be amazing right off the bat. But I think I'm just like so giddy off of his just, shininess. I don't know what to do with him.
Yeah.
I wouldn't take him before round 6 personally. He's still a tight end. He might be the once in a generational tight talent, but he is still a rookie tight end in the NFL. And he's never played an NFL down yet. No matter how amazing he comes off the board and on film, he's still a rookie tight end in my books. And before round 6 just seems too far-fetched for me.
He feels a little bit like this year's Cam Akers, right? Like, obviously a different position, but the hype surrounding everybody getting excited, and then it takes a minute.
So I'll ask you, Kyle Pitts or Mark Andrews?
I think without looking at my rankings, I'm going to knee jerk it and say Mark Andrews.
Same. I think I have Pitts at 6 right now, or 6. Yeah, 6. So yeah, I think Andrews is 5 right now for me. So.
Pitts
wait, I got to change something. I have Mark Andrews at 6, but I have Pitts at 5.
There you go.
So I gotta swap them. Thank you for the heads up.
It's going to be hard to draft him because he's going to go high, but I do think, like, without Julio Jones there, I do think he can have an historical rookie tight end season, which is crazy to say, and it sucks to have to draft him that way, but I do think it could happen.
Well, what does that mean? Because, like, when we say historic, like, the tight end 6 is like, oh yes, 4 catches and 50 yards a week. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
What I'm just trying to, like, conceptualize that versus what other options you have available in that round. Like, are you going to go for Kyle Pitts and forego depth at running back, for example? I don't know. Like, I find this part of it, like, fascinating to me, because, like, I would rather pass on a position that is decidedly volatile, and even when they're producing at a relevant level, it's still not a ton of points overall to your score. Whereas, like, it's a 17-game season, and these running backs are going to start getting hurt really quickly.
Yeah. And the running backs die off so fast this year. I feel like every year that happens, but when I'm doing drafts this year, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's no more running backs. By the time you get to the late round 4, you're looking at, you got to go get your James Conner, basically, because he's the only running back left that will see any carries. It's getting gross out there with running backs. So, yeah, I would probably not take Pitts for redraft. And I do think Troutman's going to end up moving up, though.
I mean, there's been like 11 rookie tight ends have eclipsed 600 yards over the last, like, 3 decades, and 2 of them that got over 700 yards. I mean, Jeremy Shockey, his rookie year, had like 892 yards and 2 touchdowns. Evan Ingram had 700 yards and I think like 6 touchdowns. So, I mean, is that round 5, 4, 6?
Right, that's what you have to ask yourself. Like, what points are you, like, yes, you can get the tight end 4, but at what cost overall to your point total?
Exactly. That's how I see it. So I'll probably not have a single share of him unless I get like an extra like 10 redraft leagues. And I'm like, I want to try Kyle Pitts. Why not? So, but in my main ones, I'd prefer not to if I had to. I'd rather
there is going to be one team that I'm just like an F it team, right? Like a total just yes, that guy. I don't care. It's going to look like a gorgeous Jackson Pollock painting at the end of it, and probably not fetch me nearly as much money as a Jackson Pollock painting could or would, but would still be like fun to just look at and try to explain away.
I think I do one of those every year too. But honestly, it's Travis Kelce this year for me or nothing. I'm taking Kelce early and just not worrying about the tight end position this year. That's how I feel about it. All right. So, Michelle, over to your last late round gem.
Well, my last one was Adam Troutman. So I can talk about Devonta Smith, though. He's not a late round gem. He's going in 7th, 8th round, and that could even rise by the time we get there. But I do think he's worth his current price, the 7th, 8th, 9th round, wherever you can get him. yes, I understand that he was a senior coming out of school. Everyone's like, oh, late breakout. Like, he still led his team in receiving yards the year before that as a junior. So I'm not worried about that. He had put up 1,800 receiving yards, 23 receiving yards, receiving touchdowns in the SEC. Like, that's not an easy thing to do. That's not just a fluke. And speaking of it not just being a fluke, there's only been 2 players in the FBS to average 125 plus receiving yards per game and have more than 22 receiving touchdowns in a single season over the last 20 seasons. And the other player was Devontae Adams. So it's Devontae Adams and Devonta Smith. Like, that's pretty great. I get he's skinny, but when you're a great separator and no one can touch you, it doesn't really matter that you're skinny. I believe in his talent. I believe in what he did at Alabama, and he's going into a situation where he is the immediate wide receiver 1. I don't want to hear about Jalen Reagor. Yes, he was raw coming out of school. Yes, he still has time. Like, he could still be a thing. He could still be a deep threat. I'm not worried about him taking too many targets away, though. Like, I think they drafted Devonta Smith to be the wide receiver 1 on that team. And I do think Jalen Hurts is good enough to feed him the ball. So I expect 125 plus targets this year. I think it can even be higher than that. So immediately, I do think, I know there's not a Justin Jefferson every year. There's rarely a Justin Jefferson. I'm not going to put him at that level, but I do think he'll be the top producer out of the rookie wide receivers in 2021. So I'm fine drafting him at his current price, 7th, 8th round.
I like it. Can't complain on my part. So, all right. So I'll wrap mine up here with my last one here. I had Alexander Madison, but I'm going to switch it to Paris Campbell. I'm going to go a little bit later in this draft here.
Okay.
So with Paris Campbell, guys, Paris Campbell, he's been hurt the last 2 seasons. So, people aren't really trusting him right now to actually stay on the field for 17 games this coming season here. But you bring in a new quarterback here. The first 2 years, he had Jacoby Brissett the year before, and then he had Philip Rivers. Really weren't the best options in terms of quarterback. Now you bring in a guy like Carson Wentz, who, again, if he can stay healthy and just get protection, he's a solid quarterback. He's not an amazing quarterback. He's a solid quarterback. And I think Paris Campbell has a role kind of carved out in that slot role that I think he will be used this season. You start Carson Wentz in Philly, use guys like Greg Ward, who, again, he's just a guy, be somewhat relevant the last couple of seasons here. Paris Campbell, again, when healthy, he's a really fast guy, and he's going basically almost at the end of drafts, possibly undrafted this year. And again, we don't know who's going to be the true number 1 on this Colts team. It could be T.Y., it could be Michael Pittman. Paris Campbell is basically the last one on that list here in terms of ADP here. And if you get him as your last pick, possibly go undrafted and then pick him up, he could end up possibly seeing a wide receiver 3 numbers, because this offense, I think, will get back into the passing mode slightly more than they did with Philip Rivers, and they ran the ball 1,000 times last year, whatever it was. But I think Carson Wentz can help open this offense, and I think as long as Paris Campbell can stay healthy, and with your last pick, if he shows up early on, if not, you just dump him and you just move on and get one of those rookies like we talked about earlier. So Paris Campbell is my last guy.
Yeah, I feel like he really shined for a half a second before he got injured. And we were all really excited about him, pick him up off waivers and ooh, this is going to be his breakout in his second season. Unfortunately, he had the injury, but yeah, I don't mind taking a shot on him.
It was MCL and PCL sprains, so there was no tear, which was good. And I'm in the midst of my rest versus rust series, so I've been talking to an orthopedic surgeon about knee injuries quite a bit. And PCL injuries are the most predictive return to sport knee injuries, ligament knee injuries that you can have. And he didn't even tear his. So that bodes well for a comeback if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, that's good to know. No idea.
Yeah, definitely know that. That's really great, Liz. Thank you. So we're going to wrap the show up here, guys. Those were our late round gems this evening. Ladies, thank you both so much for joining on. Had a ton of fun talking fantasy with you guys. Before we let you guys go, Michelle, you can start. Just let everyone know they can find you on social media, and if there's anything you want to mention about your guys' show.
Yeah, so you can find me at BallBlastM. You can see it written right there, BallBlastEM. On Twitter, pretty much anything I produce, I put it on there. But you can go to our website, ballblastfootball.com. That's where all of our content is published. We have an awesome team of writers, so go check that out. Ball Blast Fantasy Podcast. You can find us on anywhere you listen to podcasts. And then one thing I forgot to mention before, I do host a 49ers podcast on SB Nation. pretty random. I'm not a 49ers fan, but I've enjoyed digging into all 49ers stuff. So it's called Stats and Mags. I do that with Stats Guerrera. I'm going to mess up his last name. But yeah, you can find us over on the SB Nation 49ers podcast.
You guys gonna spill a little tea about what Tom Brady said on the shop and how it's clearly in reference to Jimmy G?
Oh yeah, we have our podcast on Friday morning. We'll definitely be having that discussion. Okay. It's either Derek Carr or Jimmy G. You think it's definitely Jimmy G?
I mean, the presumptive thought is that it's Jimmy G.
Yeah, that's pretty dirty. He did him dirty.
I feel like I missed what happened.
I kind of like Tom, like loose Tom Brady is fun, you know?
Oh yeah, I love Tom Brady lately.
It's fun, yeah.
And then Liz, over to you. Again, thank you so much for joining our show today. And again, let everyone know they can find you out on social media and anything you might want to mention.
Sure. You can follow me on social media, both Twitter and Instagram at LizLoza_FF. Right now, as I just mentioned, I am working on my Rest versus Rust series. I'm really proud of it. It is difficult, if I'm being honest, to like create new content in a space where you see the same sort of articles recycled over and over again because they're necessary and useful. So I conceived this Rest versus Rust series because COVID presented so many problems to these players who were returning from injury, and it performed really well. And I got a lot of good feedback. So with the help of Dr. Alex Weber, who's an orthopedic surgeon and the team doctor for the USC Trojans, I kicked it off last week with Dak Prescott. I'm in the midst of writing my Saquon Barkley article right now. That will post on Friday on Yahoo Sports and Yahoo Fantasy. I've got Kenny Golladay on the list. Paris Campbell is someone I'm thinking about doing, actually, which is why I had a couple of notes on him. I'd love to hear, actually, if anyone wants to tweet me like different players that they would like to see profiled, because like Joe Burrow was someone mentioned. I'm like, but you're not going to not draft him in fantasy. Like you're going to assume he's fine from his ACL. So it's a really in-depth look at understanding the injury, what it takes to come back from it, and then the fantasy analysis that is expected. Dak in particular is fascinating to me because his start of the season is really tough. He's away for 2 games in a row. He opens it, obviously, against the Buccaneers, who have a very difficult defense. And the doctor made the point about how physically and mentally, when players return to sport, he consistently, especially as a team doctor, sees hesitancy. And Dak is going to have to get used to having his ankles grabbed again. And he's going to face, I don't know, the Super Bowl championship defense, the defense that held Patrick Mahomes to 9 points. It had the Chiefs to 9 points. So Dak is going like top 4, but is he going to have a slow start to the season? Read the article, find out, and the rest of this series will come out as well. And then be sure to, if you're into the Olympics, if you're into betting for the Olympics, be sure to follow Yahoo Sports coverage of all that is going to go on in Tokyo as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll say I followed that series last year, and also on the podcast, your Yahoo Fantasy podcast.
Oh,
amazing content. I learned so much from it, and it's information you're not getting from anywhere else. Like you said, there's everyone talking about the same thing, but if you're listening to that series, you're learning so much information you're not going to hear anywhere else.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Michelle. It is a labor of love. It's a lot of work. And sometimes I'm like, why didn't I just choose to do here are 5 sleepers? But it's also, once you learn certain things about certain injuries, you can kind of extrapolate them to different situations, which is just something extra nice to have a little edge on. So I appreciate
100% be reading. Yes, for sure.
Thank you.
I'm actually going to tune into it tomorrow. So my first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a listen to it tomorrow, Liz. So thank you for that. So appreciate it. So as always, guys, we thank both of you guys for jumping on. And as always, please go follow our website at www.thefantasycoaches.com. Our writing team has got a lot of great content putting out there right now. So please go check that out. And if you guys want to give us a follow on Twitter, you can do that at Coaches Fantasy. And if you want to give me a follow, you can follow me at Coach Stephen P. And until next time, guys, have a great one.